Hello everyone, welcome to Raakvat Rugby on Megafoon Sports. My privilege to welcome back Clinton Scott from the Facebook group Lions Pride of Jozie, where I learned to understand and appreciate the Lions. Hello Clinton, welcome back.
Hi, good evening, MV. Yeah, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this session as well.
You know, as I said to you before we started chatting, I'm so worried about this weekend for the Lions because it's such a big game. And as you mentioned, of the 3 games lying ahead of them, they might consider this to be the easier one. I'm so worried that they might end up underestimating this Cardiff side. What do you think are the risks that the Lions have to watch out for? What do you have to be careful for this weekend? Careful of?
Yeah, well, absolutely complacency should not even be anywhere in their makeup. Their season just shouts out inconsistency, and they literally have their backs against the wall. So yeah, even though Cardiff might look like the easier of the 3 sides, the Lions have got to treat each game now as a final. This is like do or die for them. So Cardiff are going to come at them, and they would have obviously picked up things from the Munster game. And we know Cardiff is a good defensive side, just like Munster were. As we mentioned before as well, I mean, Cardiff have lost their last 4 games within 7 points. So the Lions are going to have to be absolutely accurate in all aspects of their game. Their set pieces, their one-on-one tackles, their accuracy on attack, last passes. They can just not underestimate this side.
Before we talk about the Lions, let's have a look at Cardiff weekend. You mentioned that they lost their last 4 games with less than 7 points, but it's not just how much or how little they lost by, but against who they lost. They lost against Ulster, 1917 away, Munster, 2015 away, Glasgow, number 1 team on the log at the moment, 17-13 away. That was just the previous weekend. This is not a Palooka team, you know. They are definitely up for it, and they, you know, apart from a few bounces here or there, they might have ended up being much higher up the log. So the Lions have to be so careful here, and I'm worried, like you just said. Now Munster showed everybody, and I spoke to Angus yesterday about from the Stormers as well. People know now how to win on the Highveld. That little altitude thing, your altitude matters and everything else. It doesn't matter anymore. These guys know how to pitch up in Joburg, or Pretoria for that matter, and win. And I'm worried that Cardiff might have learned those lessons.
Absolutely. Years ago, if we cast our mind back maybe to the Ackerman era, the altitude factor was a big thing. But teams have learned to prepare for this. They know when to fly in. They know exactly how they would tweak their training and stuff like that. So it's not really such an advantage for us anymore. They've come accustomed to it, if you like. So yeah, I doubt very much really whether the altitude is going to play such a big factor. The Lions have got to be switched on for like 80+ minutes here. Otherwise, it's going to be a very long afternoon.
And I tell you what, the one thing that stood out for me from Munster is the amount of pressure they put the Lions under. And this is something I want to talk about. Ricardo Loubser expanded on that a bit today in the press conference. And he said that they were put under so much pressure, and because especially the younger players didn't really know how to react. They were trying to be too complicated and too fancy, if I can use that word. They started fraying at the edges. They don't like being put under pressure. So the Lions went back to square one. They call it keep it simple. Stupid. We don't know about the stupid part. But keep it simple. Try and keep your calm, keep your composure, and see what you can do. Because if you start looking at why they're so inconsistent, there has to be an answer. And I think one of those answers is a bit of inexperience and inability to perform under pressure. And then trying to, like I said, trying to be too complicated and too fancy, fancy moves, and running rugby when they shouldn't be running and the likes, and then slipping up on the basics, letting tackles slip, losing lineouts, scrums even a bit under pressure if Asnauti's not playing and the likes. Lions have to, they just said, they're going to go back to basics and see what they can do to turn this game around and make sure that they win it.
No, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there when it comes to your younger guys. Very talented, but in pressure situations, they need to be reined in, by the senior players. Senior players need to be giving them that guidance as to what to do and what not to do. Because obviously all excited, they all just want to grab the ball and run. But there's times in a game, as we all know, where you can spread it wide, and there's times when you can't. And if you look at the Lions, like if you look at their last 4 games, so they decided to go back to the ball in hand approach, and it worked for them against the Sharks, where they thrashed them 40-10. But the Sharks defensively were not in their faces, so they managed to, you know, achieve success with that game plan. Then they did the same thing against Connacht, surprisingly with 14 men. But once again, they played ball in hand and they faced a team that weren't that threatening on defense. Then they came against Ospreys, where we lost 36-21. They were playing the same style of game in the beginning, but in the last 10 minutes, it just capitulated. They were like, again, one of those soft moments, younger players maybe just wanting to do things on their own. And then, yeah, specifically this last game against Munster. Munster obviously knew, they're well-coached side, so they knew the Lions are going to come at them with ball in hand. And they smothered them to such an extent that they were turning over possession, like, you know, over and over. If I go back to the stats that I was looking again at tonight, the Lions had like 61% territory. They had 60% possession in this game. If you look at those stats, they should have dominated and won it by far. But Munster was so well coached and so well prepared on defense. Every time the Lions got into their 22, they would just turn over. There were 20 times that the Lions turned over possession on attack in there. And then obviously you're on the back foot because they score on counters. So once again, it's great to have ball in hand, but now what do you do when a team's smothering you? Where's your plan B? What do you do now? Because they didn't know what to do after that. Munster were all over them and they just continued running ball in hand. So they need to vary that play.
That's an interesting thing because now, like you just mentioned in the beginning, Cardiff is a defensive team. They, like Ricardo mentioned today, they do double tackles, call it that, do a lot of turnovers, and something that I picked up from Munster the other day was how they slowed down the game. Just, you know, about dawdling along. That's all getting the players to rest because that's how they combat the effect of the altitude. And, you know, lying on the wrong side of the scrum and everything else. I think the Lions must make a point of to speed things up a little bit without going overboard, number one. But secondly, making sure that they're in the ref's ear all the time to point out to him, this guy is delaying things and that guy is delaying things. Because Munster got away with murder, let's be honest, by especially in the loose, lying on the wrong side of the scrum, and they're just allowed to get away with it. Like I said, slowing down the game and everything else, all part of their strategy. And I think we can pretty much expect the same from Cardiff this weekend.
No, absolutely. They would have taken a leaf out of that Munster's book, and they're probably going to employ the same game plan or approach. And you're right, the Lions just need to make sure they're controlling what they can control. It's in their DNA to run the ball. So don't vary off, you know, from that, but know when to pass and maybe know when to chip a little one over and that kind of thing, so you can, you know, turn them around. But yeah, they were totally frazzled every time Munster were on top of them and turned over possession.
Interesting, of course, is Tinus de Beer, who's playing fly-half for Cardiff. Ex-Puma, ex-Varsity Cup player, Varsity Cup star for that matter. Did very well this season in Cardiff. I saw somewhere he only played only 82 minutes of the entire season that he wasn't playing. So I think he's pretty much hit his stride, and he knows his local conditions. He knows what to look out for. He's definitely going to be an ace up their sleeve.
No, absolutely. And I saw in an article today where their coach was saying it was money well spent. They said that it was really a good buy for them. So yeah, like you say, he's going to know exactly what to do. He's played at Ellis Park many times. The Lions must just make sure that they're not predictable, because teams are starting to read them, and they must have something else, something special that they can do if the game's not going their way. But yeah, if we underestimate them in any way, it's going to be an extremely long afternoon.
Who do you think which players do you think we should be on the lookout for on the Lions side specifically? Who do you think are going to be key players in this game?
For the Lions, well, look, obviously we've got to dominate our set pieces, which we have been doing, but in 1 or 2 games it went a bit pear-shaped. But I think, yeah, our loose trio definitely is going to have to. I'm not sure who they've picked, but if it's a JC Pretorius, Ruan Fenter, Frankie Horn, those guys could be instrumental in, you know, getting us going forward. And then yeah, obviously our scrums have got to dominate like they did before. With Asanati being back now, I would imagine they would be steadier in that, in that part of the game. And yeah, get quick fast ball back to our backline. And I mean, any one of those backline players are dangerous in open play. I mean, Edward van der Merwe, Lethal, Marius Lowe, any one of them. So yeah, I think we just have to get the basics right. If we win our lineouts, we can't be losing lineouts. We've got to be dominant in the scrums and yeah, quick position to the backs. But like I said, the loose trio is going to be pivotal in this game, instrumental in this game, and yeah, obviously our set piece.
3 games, important games. You know, they've got a very slim chance of still making the top 8, but it's there nonetheless. But how are they going to manage the load on the players? I mean, they have to play every game to win, but I mean, all the teams at the end, more or less, the Stormers even have to play every game as if it's a knockout. How are they going to manage the workload on the players? Do you think they're going to be a bit more adventurous in this one, choose a bit slightly weaker side maybe, and then focus on the more difficult games, Glasgow next week and the Stormers the week thereafter? Because that might be a challenge, you know, getting your best players to perform 3 weeks in a row. They didn't play last week, so they had a bit of a break, you know, not being in the Challenge Cup top 4. But that to me, the Lions do not have the depth that some of the other franchises have. And how do you think they're going to overcome that?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've started like gaining depth or, growing our depth, but it doesn't come anywhere close to other big unions. So having said that, we've got to like give 80 minutes in the next 3 games. But I mean, we've been so inconsistent up till now. So you wonder, can they even do that in the next 3? But it's like they don't have a choice. So yeah, they might decide to maybe not put a weaker side in against Cardiff, but maybe just put some of the French players in the start and then bring your big guns off the bench. And yeah, then go for broke in the last 2. I know Cash mentioned something earlier that we need about 11 points to get into the knockouts, but you know what? I don't think they should be looking at 11 points. They should be trying to look at victories in all of these. And if there's bonus points, well, then it's a bonus. But yeah, if Cardiff is going to be tough, the next 2 are going to be worse.
11 points is a difficult one because that's basically 2 bonus point wins and 1 bonus point loss, basically. I understand you have to do the maths, but that's going to be tough. Tell me, just as a matter of interest, we were talking about depth now. Any idea about who's going to be coming to the Lions, who's trying to stay on a bit? I'm interested to see how the team's going to be developing going forward. Some names that you know are coming or staying at Ellis Park.
Okay, so the good news is that they managed to sign contracts with the bulk of the squad. As we know now, it's only really your Vincent Tutuke and Jordan Hendrickson that are going to be going to the Sharks. I heard that there could be like some of your older players. I don't want to really mention names now, but that might not get an extension because they've come to the end of their careers. Obviously, Willem Alberts, that's no secret. We all know he's at the end of it. So, but there could be 1 or 2 other players in the mix that might not get extensions. But we have heard in the recent weeks that they have signed Johan Ackerman, the loose head prop for Bath, Pierre Schoeman's brother, that plays for Scotland. So that would be a good loose head to bring in. We've heard they've signed Franco Marais, the hooker that played under Johan Ackerman at Gloucester and in Japan. And then obviously with all the rumors milling around where they mentioned that Ackerman was at Ellis Park a few weeks ago in a lengthy meeting, we're asking ourselves the question, is there a link to Franco Marais coming now? And yeah, so we can only hope as Lions supporters that will be like the cherry on the cake for us if Akker signs. But yeah, let's see. And then we know that obviously they have signed Kate Voliter. I mean, he came back from a debilitating injury. The Lions took him on with the knowledge that he was injured, but also with the promise to get him back to match fitness. And they've got him there, but obviously they're going to still bring him in slowly. So he's very talented. And then I also heard that they could be signing, or they have signed Lubolala Dobela, the exciting number 10 for Griquas, and he also played for the Blitzboks. So there's those few that we've heard of so far. I know they were targeting a flanker. I'm not mistaken if Xavier Steenkamp from the Bulls, from your side, was targeted. So he could be joining. So yeah, look, they need to build depth in those positions and to take us forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just wondering about, you mentioned the fly-offs coming in, and we talked about Jordan Hendrickson now leaving. I'll be honest with you, I don't think that's such a great loss. You talk about inconsistent. For me, it was, the game that they played overseas. Who was it against? The first game in the Challenge Cup that he played so well, and the Lions won overseas. Remember, what was that first game?
Yes.
Perpignan.
Perpignan, exactly.
Yes.
France.
And the next game is just nowhere. I mean, at the Montpellier, he was, I don't know, disappointing to me. So, if you talk about inconsistency, that's one of the things. I was wondering about this weekend. Do you think going to play Nwamba at 10 and Trocchi at 9, or do you think maybe Nwamba back to 9 and Jordan Hendricks at 10? What could you do?
Yeah, if it was up to me, and I think the majority of us, and just what you've said, Jordan Hendricks must maybe just help with the luggage and stuff like that. But yeah, no, on a serious note, I personally think they must go with the tried and tested in the 9 and 10 of Krapi and Sanele. That's worked for them in games where they've scored, good tries and they've won. Those were your 9 and 10s. And yeah, obviously Jordan Hendricks came to the Lions with a lot of promise, and obviously the Sharks see something in him, and so do the Springbok selectors, but he's incredibly inconsistent. I actually would go as far as saying that he's possibly cost us in some games. You can't blame one person, but number 10, we all know it's pivotal. Yeah. And he just looks lost at the moment, absolutely lost.
Yeah, it's funny now. Maybe for once, a player leaving the Lions and going to the Sharks, not leaving the Sharks and coming to the Lions. Maybe that'll turn his game around. Because typically it's the other way around. Barrios low and Nwamba, leave the Sharks and they just suddenly flourish. Even Gumede at the Bulls. He's got a new lease of life in his career. I mean, just having a proper coach, somebody to look after him. I'm just interested, just before we finish, about what would happen to Cash van Rooyen if Johan Ackerman would sign. This is a complete conjecture now. I mean, we don't know. But I'm thinking Cash is doing quite a good job. I can't really see that Ackerman needs to come into the Lions. I know he's vastly more experienced than him, but he's not shooting the lights out in Japan. I heard this week they win all their league games, but they didn't win any of the finals or the knockouts. That's becoming a bit of a problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you look at that, I mean, he had relative success at the Lions, and we obviously know that if Kwagga didn't get the red card in 2017, he probably would have ended his 3-year fairy tale, stint. Because he said when he came to the Lions, he's got a 3-year plan, and everything was on track until boom, that happened. But since then, like you say, I mean, he went to Gloucester, he had minimal success. They weren't like world beaters. And since he's been in Japan, it's more or less the same. So, yeah, and coming back to Cash, I mean, Cash has taken a lot of criticism over the years because, like we mentioned in a previous discussion, why put in a conditioning coach? But then again, Nino Abba was the same thing. And I mean, Cash has actually settled down. I think all along he needed the right support. When he started out, he had inexperience as well around him, which didn't make it any better. But since the likes of Jacques Ferry with rugby brains have come on board, Baden Pieterse, years of experience, and those kind of things, he's flourished. So obviously it's working for him. But to answer your question as to what would happen to him, I think if the Lions employed Ackerman, it might be in like a more of a director of rugby role, with Cash possibly staying on as the head coach, just reporting to Akkers, and then letting Rudolf Strali carry on with what he was intended to do in his CEO position. So I would see him coming on as a director of rugby and looking at the big picture, getting youth right up to the top, all on the same page, same blueprint, involving club rugby, looking at our varsities, that kind of thing. That's where I would see him fitting in. But I mean, again, I'm not Lions management.
I'm going to use a very strange metaphor now, or a bit of a strangled metaphor, especially seeing that you talked about being in the hospitality industry once. This Lions cake is going along nicely. It's the temperature's just right, it's rising. But if you take it out of the oven too quickly, it's going to fall flat, and that's what I'm concerned about. It's too early. That's why they're so inconsistent, because of inexperience. They play a few more seasons like that, maybe just 1 or 2 more, and I can see this specific team with these players really doing well, with all this experience behind them. It's going to make a difference. You can see it with the Bulls this year. The guys who battled a year or 2 ago because of youth and inexperience, a lack of depth, all of those things will fall into place at the Lions, and the Lions can go places. They just mustn't overreact now and throw out the baby with the bathwater.
No, I agree with you. And you know what? I think it's more emotional thing. When anybody mentions Akker, he was like a savior,
Yeah.
you know, to Lions rugby. So when they mention that name, then everybody gets lyrical. Akkers. But like you say, I mean, everything is it's a work in progress. And yes, Cash took, you know, he took the brunt of what was going on, but slowly but surely they've gathered momentum. And if we look at their season as a whole, as you mentioned last time, they were also, just like Cardiff has lost a few games by 7 and less, there were 5 games in the beginning where the Lions just as well could have won those games. They were losing their games by 1, 2 points, maybe 7. If that was, if it was on the flip side of that, we would have been in the knockouts already, wouldn't be fighting for our life now. So I totally agree with you. Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think another season or maybe 2, the Lions could actually be challenging for silverware.
No, I agree. I
Current
100%
coaching
agree.
call.
With the current coaches, I agree. I mean, they've done so much, and they've gone through so much, and you know, struggled and paid the school fees for that matter.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
just, you know, I can't see. I want them to succeed. I honestly do, and I think honestly they can next year. It would be a pity if they don't make it to the top 8. I would have loved to see them in the Champions Cup next year. And just, you know, I suppose top 8 would have been their target probably for the year. But they're quite close, and I think they're probably closer than what they expected to be.
Yes. No, absolutely. And like you say, it's a mountain to climb for them now. It's all to play for. If it doesn't happen and they don't get in there, at least give their all in the last 3 games and just show everybody what they're capable of. And it's a promise for the season to come. If they do get in, well, then obviously it's a bonus. But I agree with you. It's a cake that is ready to rise, and the icing is almost ready to be put on. Don't open that oven too soon. You're right. I mean, it could just flop.
Yeah. I just, one last thing. I spoke to Angus yesterday, like I said, about the Stormers, and I said to him, I'm so worried about those last 2 South African derbies, where the Bulls have to go down to Durban and face the Sharks. I called it a banana peel. You know, the banana boys. I don't want to go slip on a banana peel against the Sharks after the season we had. And I can honestly see the Lions upsetting the Stormers now, that last game. It can happen. The Lions are good enough to give the Stormers a proper scare and even probably beat them, even if it's in Cape Town. They have beaten the Stormers in Cape Town before, in the URC.
Absolutely. That's the one positive thing about the Lions. They're very unpredictable, but if they pitch on the day, they can you know, take you to shreds. So yeah, I mean, obviously we know how well the Stormers have played, barring that thrashing they had against you guys a while ago. But I mean, Dobson is established. They play for him. They play for pride. But I also believe that the Lions can go there and upset the apple cart. And yeah, I mean, you know, they've got to. I think personally for these players, like you mentioned earlier, there's so much talent in this Lions squad. All these guys that have been now recognized for the first time in years by a Springbok coach. You know, and I believe there's more. I believe the likes of a Frankie Hornet, number 8, even Osanasi and Tlabakanya has got a lot of potential. He might need to shed some weight, but he's got skills.
He has shed some weight now, since the beginning of the season.
No, he has. And then the likes of Ed, well, those guys will never let you down in a Springbok jersey. So they must just nurture these guys. Unfortunately, the majority have re-signed. And like you say, don't throw the baby and everything out. Go with what is working now. It's a few tweaks here and there, and who knows? We could be hosting a quarter, a semi, or even a final at Ellis Park in the near future.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Simple as that.
That's it.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Okay, Clinton, thanks, man. That was quite an interesting conversation. I never thought I would be talking about the Lions and get all excited about it. If you told me this a year ago, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah. But I'm glad that even if it took that 1 year over, I'll continue to do the same. I'm glad that the Lions has become your second team now.
Yeah, I like it. I enjoy it. I'll tell you what, I like the underdog. I always support the underdog, you know, and I kind of like this kind of plucky, you know, fighting terrier kind of a thing. I enjoy that kind of spirit in the team, any sport for that matter.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, the Lions, I think, have carried the underdog tag many a year. But yeah, when they shine, and yeah, I think there's few places that have got the atmosphere of a full Ellis Park. So we're all just trusting and hoping we're going to see that again.
Hey, Clinton, thanks so much. I appreciate your time. And hopefully we'll be doing this again soon.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Thanks so much, Envia.
Okay, people, thank you very much for watching, and watch out for our videos about where we talk about the Stormers. We're going to be talking about the Sharks as well. Can you believe it? And of course, we're going to be talking about the Bulls. Don't miss that. And we'll also be publishing the Stormers press conference quite soon. Darby Snyman and Salman Murat. And then tomorrow morning, we will be attending the Bulls team announcement and publish that for you as well. Until next time, goodbye.